My name is Sarah Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and I live in a small town just outside Denver, Colorado, where I enjoy the quiet life and scenery.
If you had met me 3 years ago, you probably would have thought I had a pretty ordinary life. I worked as a maintenance supervisor for a property management company. I spent my days fixing broken pipes, replacing light fixtures, and dealing with tenants who always seemed to call at the worst possible time. It wasn't glamorous, I didn't wear expensive suits, I didn't have a fancy office, and according to my parents, I had wasted my potential. What they didn't know was that every late night, every extra shift, every sacrifice I made was leading to something they never expected. And one evening, at a family dinner, all of their insults came crashing down with a single document, a deed, with my name on it. But to understand how we got there, I need to take you back to the beginning, because my family didn't start out hating me. At least, I don't think they did. Growing up, there were only 4 of us. My dad, Robert, my mom, Linda, my older brother, Michael, and me. Michael was the golden child. He was captain of the football team. He got straight A's. He won every award imaginable. Whenever relatives came over, my parents would proudly show them his trophies. Then they would point at me and say something like, "Sarah's different. She likes working with her hands." At first, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I loved building things. I loved repairing things. I loved figuring out how things worked. When I was 12, I fixed our broken lawnmower. When I was 14, I rebuilt my grandfather's old workbench. When I was 16, I helped our elderly neighbor repair her porch. I was proud of those things, but my parents never were. They wanted a doctor, a lawyer, an executive, not a girl who came home covered in dust and paint. I remember the day I told them I wanted to study construction management. The room went completely silent. Then my father laughed. Actually laughed. "You want to be a repairman?" I smiled nervously. "No, I want to manage properties." My mother looked disappointed. "Sweetheart, that's not exactly a career people dream about." Michael smirked. "I guess somebody has to unclog toilets." Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. I laughed too. Because that's what you do when the people you love make fun of you. You pretend it doesn't hurt. But it did. More than I wanted to admit. Still, I followed my dream. I worked during the day and attended classes at night. I graduated with almost no debt because I paid for everything myself. No help from my parents. No financial support. Nothing. And honestly, that was fine. I wasn't looking for money. I was looking for respect. Unfortunately, I was never going to get it. Because in my family, success only counted if it looked impressive. And my job didn't. Not to them. A few years later, Michael became an investment consultant. At least that's what he called himself. In reality, he jumped from one business idea to another. One month he was trading stocks. The next month he wanted to start a restaurant. Then he got involved in real estate. Every time he failed, my parents gave him money. $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. They called it helping him get back on his feet. Meanwhile, I bought my first used pickup truck. By myself. I rented a tiny apartment. By myself. I worked 60-hour weeks. By myself. But none of that mattered. Every family dinner was exactly the same. So, Michael has another investment opportunity. Michael met some important people. Michael's going places. Then someone would ask about me, and my father would shrug. Sarah fixes apartments. As if that one sentence summarized my entire existence. I wish I could tell you I stopped caring, but I didn't. A small part of me still wanted them to be proud. I wanted my dad to say, "That's my daughter." I wanted my mom to brag about me. I wanted to matter. Instead, I became invisible. Then something happened that changed everything. One of the apartment complexes I managed was being sold. The owner was an elderly man named Mr. Howard. He had owned several buildings across town for decades. I had worked for him for years. One evening, after we finished inspecting a property, he asked me a strange question. "Sarah, if you had the chance to own one of these buildings, would you?" I laughed. "I can barely afford rent." He smiled. "That's not what I asked." I looked at him, and for some reason, I answered honestly. "Yes, I'd love to." He nodded. Then he said something I will never forget. "I've been watching you for years. You're the hardest worker I've ever hired." I didn't know what to say. Then he added, "Most people see a maintenance worker. I see an owner." At the time, I thought he was just being kind. I had no idea those words would completely change my future, because 6 months later, Mr. Howard called me into his office and made me an offer that sounded impossible. Mr. Howard folded his hands on top of his desk and looked at me carefully. "Sarah, how much money do you have saved?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He smiled. "Humor an old man." I hesitated. "About $60,000. He nodded slowly. "That's more than I expected." I laughed nervously. "It took me almost 10 years. He stood and walked toward the window. "You know the building on Maple Street?" Of course I knew it. A beautiful 6-unit apartment building, brick exterior, new roof, perfect location. Every investor in town wanted it. I nodded. He turned toward me. "I want to sell it." I smiled politely. "Whoever buys it is going to make a fortune." Then he said something that made my heart stop. "I want to sell it to you." I stared at him. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Then I laughed because I thought he was joking, but he wasn't laughing. "I don't understand." "The building is worth nearly $1 million. "It is. I can't afford that," he smiled. "Not at market value." I sat there in complete shock. Mr. Howard explained that he planned to retire. He didn't want his properties sold to giant corporations. He wanted someone who cared about people, someone who had spent years keeping those buildings alive, someone he trusted. He wanted me. I still couldn't believe it. "Why me?" He smiled softly. "Because every tenant knows your name, because you've never taken shortcuts, because you treat every property as if it belongs to you." Then he slid a folder across the desk. I opened it. The sale price was less than half the market value. I looked up at him. "This has to be a mistake." "It isn't." I felt tears filling my eyes. "This would change my life." "I know." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." He smiled. "Say yes." And I did. That afternoon changed everything. But I didn't tell my family. Not yet. I wanted to make sure it was real first. I wanted to sign every paper. I wanted the keys in my hand. Because after years of disappointment, I had learned something important. Never celebrate too early. The next few months were exhausting. Meetings, paperwork, loans, inspections. I barely slept. I worked my regular job during the day and spent every evening preparing for the biggest purchase of my life. Only 2 people knew, Mr. Howard and my best friend, Emily. One night we sat in my apartment eating takeout. She looked at me. "Your family is going to lose their minds." I laughed. "I don't even know if I should tell them." "You have to." "No, I don't." She raised an eyebrow. "Sarah, you're buying an apartment building." I smiled. "I know." She shook her head. "I still can't believe it." Neither could I, but I wasn't ready to share the news, because every time I imagined telling my parents, I could already hear their voices. "That's risky. You should invest in Michael's business instead." "You're not experienced enough." I didn't want their opinions. I wanted peace. So I kept quiet. Unfortunately, secrets have a way of finding the light, and mine was about to be discovered. A week before closing on the building, my mother invited everyone to dinner. I almost didn't go, but she insisted. "Your brother has exciting news." That sentence alone told me exactly how the evening would go. I arrived and immediately saw Michael grinning. He looked unusually confident. We sat down. Dinner started. Then my father raised his glass. "To Michael." Everyone smiled. My brother cleared his throat. "I've decided to start my own real estate company." My mother clapped. My father looked proud. I quietly continued eating. Then Michael looked at me. "Maybe someday you'll work for me." Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. "Congratulations." He leaned back in his chair. "I've already found the perfect building." I froze. "What building?" "The one on Maple Street." My fork stopped in midair. I slowly looked up. Michael smiled. "I'm putting together investors." The room suddenly felt very warm. I couldn't breathe. He wanted my building, the building I was days away from buying. "You know the owner?" I asked. "No, but I will." He laughed. "Once I make my offer, he'll never say no." I looked down at my plate. I didn't say a word. Then my father turned toward me. "You should invest your savings with your brother." I almost choked. "What?" "You've been hoarding money for years. This could finally make you successful." My mother nodded. "Imagine actually having a real career." I felt something inside me crack. a real career, after everything I'd done, after all the years of hard work. I slowly put down my fork. I'm happy with my job. My brother smirked. You'll understand someday. I looked at him. No, he was the one who didn't understand. But I stayed quiet, because in 6 days, everything was going to change. The morning of the closing, I was shaking. I could barely hold my coffee. Mr. Howard met me outside the attorney's office. You look terrified.
I feel terrified, he laughed. That's normal. We went inside. The next 2 hours felt like a dream. Paper after paper, signature after signature. Then finally, the attorney smiled. Congratulations, Ms. Bennett. You're officially the owner. I stared at him. Owner. The word didn't feel real. Someone handed me the keys. I looked down at them. My hands started shaking. I actually did it. I owned the building. I walked outside and burst into tears. Happy tears. Exhausted tears. The kind of tears that come after years of believing you're not enough. Mr. Howard hugged me. I knew you could do it. I looked at him. No one else did. He smiled. Then they're about to be surprised. I had no idea how right he was, because later that night, my parents invited me to dinner again, and that dinner would become one of the most unforgettable nights of my life. I almost didn't go to that dinner. After signing the papers, all I wanted to do was go home, sit on my couch, and stare at the keys in my hand. But my mother kept calling. Everyone's coming. Don't be late. So I went. I walked into my parents' dining room carrying a simple brown envelope. Inside it was a copy of the deed. I hadn't planned to show anyone. I only brought it because I still couldn't believe it was real. The house was already full. My parents, my brother Michael, his girlfriend, my aunt and uncle, a couple of cousins. Everyone was there. As usual, the conversation revolved around Michael. He was talking about investors and business opportunities. Then my father raised his glass. To my future real estate tycoon. Everyone cheered. I quietly took my seat. Then Michael smiled at me. You know, Sarah, if you ever get tired of fixing toilets, I might need a property manager. The table laughed. I looked down at my plate. I had heard versions of that joke for years, but for some reason, tonight it didn't hurt, because for the first time in my life, I knew something they didn't. My mother looked at me. You should listen to your brother. He's going places. Then my father added, You've always been too comfortable thinking small. That sentence stayed in the air. Thinking small. I spent 10 years saving every dollar. I worked weekends. I skipped vacations. I repaired apartments at midnight. I helped tenants during snowstorms. I sacrificed everything. And to them, I was thinking small. Michael leaned back in his chair. I actually have a meeting next week about the Maple Street building. I looked up. You still want that building? Of course. He smiled confidently. Once I own it, my business will finally take off. Then he laughed. Can you imagine me owning that place? I looked at him for several seconds. Then I quietly said, I can. He grinned. Maybe I'll let you manage it. More laughter. I took a slow breath. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. Nobody noticed. My father was still talking. You know the difference between you two? Michael takes risks. You settle. I looked at him. Then I gently placed the envelope in the center of the table. The room went quiet. My mother frowned. What's that? I didn't answer. Michael opened it. At first he looked confused. Then his expression changed. He read the first page again, then a third time. The smile disappeared from his face. What is this? I finally spoke. It's the deed. He blinked. The deed to what? I looked directly at him. The Maple Street building. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. You bought it? He asked. I nodded. The room became completely silent. My father laughed nervously. Very funny. It's not a joke. My mother reached for the paper. She read it. Then she looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger. Your name is on this. Yes. You own the building? Yes. My father suddenly stood up. When did this happen? This morning. You bought an apartment building? Yes. The room exploded with questions. How? With what money? Why didn't you tell us? I looked around the table. For years I had dreamed of this moment.
I imagined feeling angry, proud, vindicated, but instead, I felt calm, because I finally realized something. I didn't need their approval anymore. I never did. My brother looked stunned. "Why would Mr. Howard sell it to you?" I smiled, because I spent years taking care of it. Nobody said anything. Then my father quietly sat back down. For the first time in my life, he looked speechless. A few moments later, my mother asked the question that changed everything. "How much is it worth?" I told them. The room went silent again. My brother looked like someone had punched him. My father stared at me. Then he said something I never expected. "I'm proud of you." I wish I could say hearing those words made everything better, but it didn't, because I realized he was only proud now that my success looked impressive, not when I was fixing broken pipes, not when I worked 60-hour weeks, not when I was struggling, only now. I smiled politely. "Thank you." But something inside me had changed. The little girl who spent years trying to earn her parents' approval was finally gone. Over the next few weeks, things became strange. My parents suddenly wanted to visit all the time. My brother started asking questions about investing. My relatives talked about me differently. I was no longer the daughter who fixes apartments. I was the one who owns the building. At first, I didn't know how to feel about it. Then one evening I visited Mr. Howard. I told him everything. He listened quietly. Then he smiled. "You know why I sold the building to you?" I nodded. "Because I worked hard." He shook his head. "No." I looked at him. "I sold it to you because you never changed. You respected people when nobody was watching." He smiled. "Don't let money change that." I never forgot those words. A few months later, I invited my family to the Maple Street building. I gave them a tour. They couldn't believe it. My father walked through the hallways in complete silence. At one point he looked at me and said, "You really built something." I smiled. "No." I looked around the building. "I built myself." And for the first time, he understood. Today, 3 years later, I own several properties. I still work hard. I still answer tenant calls. I still carry my toolbox in my truck, because I never wanted a title. I wanted freedom, and I wanted a life I could be proud of. My relationship with my family is better now. Not perfect, but better. My parents eventually apologized. My brother apologized too. It took time, a lot of time. Trust doesn't magically return, but people can change, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, and sometimes only after they're forced to see the truth. If there's one thing I learned from this journey, it's this. Never let someone else's opinion decide your worth. People will laugh at your dreams because they can't see what you see. They'll call your work small. They'll underestimate you. They'll overlook you. And one day, they'll be shocked by what you've quietly built. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to keep going. Because the people who mock your journey today might one day stand in front of everything you built and finally understand who you were all along. And sometimes, all it takes is one name on a deed